This podcast is not CME eligible. If people do want to learn more about CME eligible podcasts, Alex, what do they do?
They can go to jerrypal.org/CME.
And on to the show. Welcome to the Jerry Pal Podcast. This is Eric Widera.
This is Alex Smith.
And Alex, we're going to be talking about longevity. I can't pronounce it.
Longevity
science.
maybe?
I don't know what's wrong with my tongue today. Miracles or snake oils? That's going to be the topic. Who do we have with us?
We're delighted to welcome Mahtab Jafari, who's a professor of pharmaceutical sciences and director of the UC Irvine Center for Healthspan Sciences. We met at the UCSF alumni reunion, and she was talking to me about how she had been approached by several media outlets about this or that longevity medication. And I thought, oh boy, this would make a great podcast. So thank you so much for joining us, Mahtab.
Thank you for having me.
Zot, zot, zot. Go Anteaters. That's my, that's my alumni right there.
Oh, there you
undergrad.
Go. Yeah. Anteaters. I didn't know that.
Anteaters. Zot, zot, zot.
Okay, you can do two. Zot, zot, zot.
Is that the sound an anteater makes?
That is.
I'm learning a lot on this podcast.
Yeah, you watch an anteater. They're just constantly zotting.
Zot. And John Newman, who has been a frequent guest on this podcast, is a geriatrician and geroscientist who works at the Buck Institute in Marin as well as UCSF. John, welcome back to the Jerry Pal Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. And so much has changed since the last time we talked about this stuff. So much.
I'm excited to learn how to live forever.
I think that was the song request the first time John was on. Who Wants to Live Forever? Not easy to sing, that Queen stuff, by the way.
So we got a lot to talk about. We'll be talking about why you guys got interested in this and what's the goalpost and what meds are promising and which ones potentially are snake oils. But before we talk about all of that, song request? Who has the song request today?
I had the song request, although we had a mind meld on the song.
Yeah? What is the song?
Wake Me Up by Avicii, which I love because to me, it's a song about aging. It's a song about the tension between like you want to keep this like vibrancy and the open horizons of youth, but also there's a lot of stress of not knowing what's going to happen and how you're going to get through it. And when you're older, you have this self-assurance. You know who you are. You've done the journey. And what if you could just meld the best parts together? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about.
That's great.
And Mahtab, you have a connection to this song too. You want to share that with our listeners?
Sure. I was so excited when John suggested this song because I happen to know the songwriter and the artist, Aloe Blacc, who is one of my absolute favorite people on this planet, not because he's an amazing artist, because he's also a great human being. So I almost listen to this song, believe it or not, every day. I feel like I need to listen to it. It just calms me down. And with John's description of the song, now I have new insights. Now I'm going to listen to it a little bit more carefully because he's right.
Yeah. Well, what is it actually about, according to the person who wrote it?
Everybody interprets it differently. And that's a good question. I should ask Aloe that question. I've never asked him that question. He just knows that this is one of my, I would say this is my favorite songs. I don't want to say one of my favorites. It's like number one and then.
Okay, before we raise the bar too high, let me play a little interpretation of the first verse and chorus. Here's a little bit. Feel my way through the darkness, guided by a beating heart. I can't tell where the journey will end, but I know where it starts. Tell me I'm too young to understand. They say I'm caught up in a dream. I have to hit this button. Life will pass me by if I don't open up my eyes. Well, that's fine by me. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I didn't know I was lost.
Great song.
Yeah, I love that song.
Yeah. Avicii, great artist too. Sad that he died so young. and we're going to be talking about living longer or living healthier. Or, well, before we get even into that topic, maybe I could just turn to you. How did you get interested in this topic of longevity? Hey, I actually pronounced it correct this time.
You did.
Mahtab.
How did I get interested in
Yeah.
longevity? So I run a basic science lab at UC Irvine, and I work with mainly model systems, fruit flies and mice. And for the past 20 years, I've been trying to extend the lifespan of my flies and also improve their health span. Because until probably 2 or 3 decades ago, the aging research focused mainly on lifespan. So we extended the lifespan of C. elegans and nematodes, and they were just not moving. So obviously their health span was not so great. But now a lot of focus is on health span because we want to add healthy years to human life. But prior to starting this lab, I was mainly doing research in diseases of aging, such as, from mainly cardiovascular disease. When I was at UCSF, that's pretty much what I did. I was the clinical pharmacist in CCU, dealing with patients with coronary artery disease and cardiac issues. But when I came back to UCI to, start another field of research, I decided to develop a basic science lab that focused mainly on aging. And 20 years ago, I was very naive, thinking that I am going to find the fountain of youth, and maybe it's just one molecule or one botanical extracts, and we are going to extend human lifespan. And I think 21 years later, I have a different perspective when it comes to aging. But the idea was that all these diseases of aging fall under this big umbrella of aging. And if we can slow the aging process, and if we can improve the function of the organs or slow the aging of different organs in our bodies, we will have healthy years to our lives. So we can improve not just the lifespan and health span. And I have tested 100 different compounds, mainly botanical extracts, for the past 20 plus years. And I've had some success stories in my fruit flies.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. We'll be talking about some of those maybe success stories and kind of which ones you think were most promising. Can I ask you one other follow-up question before I go to John? It just feels like, at least here in Northern California, Silicon Valley, in the last 5 or 10 years, especially with just the sheer amount of money that's flowing into these people with a lot of wealth, there is a lot of focus on, it feels like, living longer and living healthier. Are you feeling a difference over the last 20 years, or is that just kind of a reporter bias?
No, I definitely feel the difference, and I want to hear John's opinion. I think probably the best example of that is Altos Labs. That is this, I think it was founded in 2022 with a very modest startup of $3 billion. And now I think they have $5 billion of worth of funding. And of course, they are secretive. They're not publishing a lot. And I want to hear again what John has to say. But I have a feeling that this lab is developing, obviously, drugs that they want to eventually test in humans and see clinical applications. But they are taking the traditional route of FDA approval.
Yeah.
They're not into developing a snake oil. And at least this is my understanding without me knowing too much about what's going on behind the closed doors.
Is this Sam Bankman-Fried's ChatGPT, OpenAI? I forget.
So Jeff Bezos, I believe,
Jeff
is
Bezos.
one of the biggest.
It's hard to keep track of the billionaires nowadays.
I can't keep track of them.
And I don't think it's
one
just
example.
I think each one of them has their own.
I'm sure they do. And I don't think it's just a Northern California phenomenon or a Southern California. I mean, certainly there's a lot of obsession with healthy aging or in Southern California. It's also just around the country and probably around the world based on the influencers I see.
And John, you've been
Northern California gets the first place.
Yeah.
We got
a lot of narcissists up here too. So, John, you've been doing this for a while too, right? What got you interested in this?
Well, I'm a clinician scientist, but I was a scientist first, and I'm the kind of science geek as a kid where I thought when I first learned about like our genomes are made up of 4 bases that you could like read the letters of life. And then the first time I'm just old enough, I've like sequenced a gene and read the sequence on a piece of film that I put up against the window where you can like read, that's an A, that's a T. But the coolest thing I ever learned in science was that aging is biology. And I ran into that the first time in grad school, where I accidentally started working on this gene that did some cool like RNA molecular thing in the cell, but was a gene that caused a premature aging syndrome in kids. And like, what? That's a thing? Like you could one base pair change in a gene and you can have this like multi-system aging kind of thing going on. Like you can control aging with genes. And that was right about the time that aging biology was really starting to kick off about 20 years ago with labs all over the country. And that's still the coolest thing I've ever learned. And then, I fell in love with geriatrics when I was in 3rd and 4th year of medical school. And that set me on a path of, I want to figure out how to apply this biological understanding of aging mechanisms to meaningfully improve the health and lives of older adults. And 20 years later, I'm still doing that. And I'm actually getting closer and closer to hopefully like fulfilling the dream of really changing things with that.
And do you think about the same thing? Are you thinking more about health span, improving the health for the time people have, or lifespan too?
Oh, so in the circles you're talking about, I am the most boring person in the world because I'm a geriatrician. And so I think about the geriatric problems. I want to fix frailty and delirium. And yeah, that's going to hopefully keep people functional longer and healthier longer, better able to do the things they want to do, and probably live longer as a side effect. But yeah, I think it's a lot of people in the field these days are talking about health span and healthy longevity. And it's more the idea of trying to stay healthier longer so we can do things we want to do longer and not necessarily living longer. Some people use the idea of centenarians as an example of like people who actually live lives like this, like, into your late 90s and you're living on your own, you're doing things you love. And then relatively suddenly, you reach the end, but you don't have this long period of decline and you have a long, healthy life of doing things that you love. And that's something that people actually live and maybe an attainable goal for many of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, speaking to our geriatricians, our palliative care clinicians, like they recognize that most people want to live long lives, as functional as they can be, as independent as they can be. And I think there's also this other side, which, this is where it can run into problems, is when we exclusively focus on that, we can take away from the focus on supporting those people who are living with disability, who also have the potential to have high quality lives, people who are living with cognitive impairment, who also have the ability to live rich, full lives, people who are nearing the end of their life, who still can grow in important ways near the end of their lives. So I think both can be true at the same time. And one of the issues with the longevity focus and the relentless focus on, being youthful as long as possible is that the flip side of that coin is that there can be a stigma.
Yeah, there's a lot of
around
ableism.
Aging, ableism, around, living with cognitive impairment, for example. So I just wanted to say that it's not necessarily a question unless you have reflections on that as well.
Well, this plays right into how does longevity science, aging biology become a normal part of medicine? Like, what do you prescribe something for? Like, what do you get a drug approved for? And there is this kind of ongoing debate about, is aging a disease? Are we treating aging? Are we trying to like stop aging? And I have strong feelings about that for exactly what you're saying, Al, that like there's so much ageism in the world. And like my interpretation of Wake Me Up, aging is not bad. Like I would not trade places with my 22-year-old self because I like it better right now. And but there are some things that might.
I like to be 22, John.
But there are some effects of aging that we like, multiple chronic diseases or disability that we wish we could generally put off or try to treat or fix.
Yeah, to be sure.
So how do you square that circle? What's the drug indication?
Yeah.
And we have some ideas.
Right. Okay.
So I want to make sure we have time to talk about kind of some of the things that people are using, some of the things that you're most are most promising to you. Maybe some of the things you do for yourself. But before we do that, before we say like what works and what doesn't, I wonder if we can talk about how do we define what works when it comes to this? Because I'm guessing we're not going to do like a 50-year-long trial to see if it actually extends people's health span or lifespan. And so we're going to have to use some surrogate markers, I think. I don't know. How do you define what's the goalpost here? What works?
Well, if you're in the laboratory, if you're studying flies and worms, even mice, absolutely you can use lifespan. And the fun thing is, so we'll talk about people in a sec, but as I'm sure Mahtab can describe, you can measure function and healthy lifespan even in worms and flies.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what I've been doing for the past 21 years in my lab. When I decided to shift the focus of my research from pharmacotherapy and drugs in cardiovascular diseases to aging, I was looking for a model system, and I look at yeast, I look at C. elegans, and I settled on fruit flies because they're great. The fruit fly is a great model system to study aging. We share 75% of our disease genes with fruit flies, and it's very easy to work with them. They don't have long, lives. Well, except for the population that I developed in my lab a few years ago, they can live for much longer periods of times. And it's easy to measure health span in fruit flies. So when I started my research 21 years ago, I developed this algorithm. And the first thing that I did was I measured mortality. What is the impact of this, dietary supplement or pharmaceutical on the mortality of the flies? And then after that, I did a lifespan study. And then if the compound increased the lifespan, then I started a series of health span assays. And again, it's not difficult to measure health span in fruit flies. Probably the best biomarker would be reproduction, fecundity in female flies, and mating behavior and reproduction in males. You can look at their movement, locomotion, sleep, eating behaviors. And then we started also looking at memory, but it was a very, very complicated, biomarker to measure. So I stopped doing that. You can look at metabolic rate. And one thing that we have to remember is that, yes, I have been able to extend the lifespan and improve the health span of my fruit flies. But when I publish a paper and, I show that, for instance, curcumin, rhodiola rosea, rosa damascena, they did great. They increased lifespan, improved health span. And then people ask me, should I take it because I want to increase my lifespan and health span? I say, if you are a fruit fly, absolutely go for it. But that's that. And then I'm going to stop there. And of course, we tested one of our botanicals, rhodiola rosea, in a mouse model, a leptin deficient mice. And we showed that, it improved biomarkers of diabetes. But I stopped there. So I tell people, yes, if you're a mouse and if you're a fruit fly, but then again, there are clinical studies with these botanicals. And how do you extrapolate the data from a fly to mouse to humans? That's a whole, that could be a different podcast. But but I think model systems, studies in model systems are promising.
And John, you're doing a little of that, right? You're doing some testing in humans, is that right?
Yeah, doing a lot of clinical research with humans now with the goal of answering exactly the question you just asked. How do we know if something works targeting the biology of aging? How do we know that it's meaningfully improving someone's life?
Do you observe people for, 40 years from the initiation of the trial and then monitor their healthy years and their lifespan and health span?
Right. I wish there was an NIH mechanism for that.
There is no.
But no, so you don't have to. And a lot of smart people smarter than me, have been thinking about this for a while now, because the single biggest barrier to why don't we have medicines that we can prescribe right now that target aging is figuring out how to run a clinical trial like that to show a broad effect on aging. But a lot of smart people have been thinking about it. One of the biggest ideas that is now 10 or 15 years old is using multimorbidity as a target for a drug that targets aging. So the idea that there are already drugs out there that you can prescribe to prevent one disease. There are also some drugs out there that you can prescribe to prevent or treat several different diseases individually. But what if you could prescribe a drug to prevent or treat 4 or 5 or 6 diseases, all of which are driven by aging, but are not directly related to each other, but you could prevent all of them together. Then, yeah, that's a good sign that a drug is really targeting aging. And so that was the design of the Targeting Aging with Metformin study, which was going to be the first big, 3,000 person, 3-year randomized controlled trial testing a drug, which was going to be metformin, to see if it broadly affected aging by delaying the onset of one of a basket of major chronic diseases. So that's still a pretty good
not
idea.
just one, but multiple. Like not just affecting
one.
diabetes, but
yeah, but dementia, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, a bunch of things all in the same basket. That's still a good idea, and that's probably still a good path to getting FDA approval for a drug. But nowadays, just in the last few years, this concept of intrinsic capacity.
we talked about that in Brazil.
We talked about that in Brazil with Eduardo Ferrioli.
Right.
People can listen to that podcast. We'll have a link in the show notes here. Yeah, cool. John, but many people won't have listened to it. So please let us, what's your understanding of intrinsic capacity?
I'll give you the thumbnail sketch, but then why is it important for aging? And if you're a clinician listening to this, you probably should learn a bit about intrinsic capacity because it's a concept that's more popular elsewhere in the world right now, but is coming to the US. It's a World Health Organization framework, which to me is basically a way of doing a quantitative, comprehensive geriatric assessment of someone's whole health across 5 domains. So it encompasses cognitive function, physical function, mobility, psychological health, sensory health, and vitality, which John Beard, the guy who came up with intrinsic capacity, describes as the ability to maintain all the other abilities. So you measure someone's health across these 5 domains, and you have a comprehensive picture of their overall state of health, which is a really cool geriatric concept. And so it's being used around the world to help to guide multi-component geriatric interventions. But it's also a kind of holistic measurement of someone's health in aging that you could use to help guide therapies that target mechanisms of aging. And there's an ICD-11 code for age-related decline in intrinsic capacity.
Oh, really?
Based on that, like it's a real diagnosis.
Yeah.
Maybe that diagnosis could be the reason you prescribe a drug.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big idea. Could you measure intrinsic capacity in a really sensitive way so that you could detect changes in someone's aging trajectory just over a couple of years? And maybe not even when they're that old, maybe even earlier in life, in middle age or younger, and use that like a blood pressure or like a growth chart for aging to guide prescribing drugs and getting drugs approved to target declines in intrinsic capacity.
Mahtab, what do you think about intrinsic capacity?
I think that it's a great idea, but I just want to make one quick comment about metformin because I agree with you, John. This TAME study is very interesting. And I really hope that we will get some results because it's not completed yet. But from what I have seen, at least in model systems, metformin doesn't extend the lifespan universally. It's very sex specific. I agree with you. It has pleiotropic effects, and that's why it makes it a promising drug. But I think we have a long way to go before we say that metformin, this is it. This is the drug that is going to help us with longevity. But as far as intrinsic capacity, I really like that. That's why when people talk about biological age clock, my favorite, and I know I'm going to be burned and getting some comments on that, is still the KDM-8 that looks at functional biomarkers when we develop studies and we try to have outcomes to measure if this intervention worked. Because this age clock really looks at the functions of different organs in our bodies. And I think this is probably the only way that we can evaluate if the intervention had any impact on aging. And as John said, there are different categories. Cognitive function is one. And then you have all these different organ systems, cardiovascular, renal. So yeah, I agree 100%. But as far as clinical studies goes, something else, I'm just going to throw it out there.
Please.
That metformin and rapamycin are generic, drugs. Whoever comes up with the best study for these drugs, they're not going to file an IND application and have a new drug on the market. And I think this is why the funding has been challenging for both studies. I mean, John, I think for the TAME, we still need another like $20 million to complete that study, or I could be wrong.
This is the metformin study?
This is yeah.
TAME hasn't
Targeting
really
aging
started
with
yet
metformin.
because of challenges with funding. TAME, and it's in describing. So TAME was about how to run a clinical trial, and it wasn't about metformin really.
Yeah.
But metformin at the time was probably the best bet based on the data that existed almost 15 years ago now. But things have changed since then. But yeah, TAME is not about metformin per se, but about how you would design a clinical trial to get FDA approval. I think it's going to be the most influential clinical trial that may never happen.
Yeah.
Because it's so deeply influenced how
so?
Companies, for example, look at designing clinical trials to get other drugs approved.
How so? Give me like an example.
But TAME is testing metformin. If it's targeting aging with metformin, is that
if TAME had launched 10 years ago,
right.
it would be testing metformin for multimorbidity. But the clinical trial design wasn't designed for metformin. It was designed as this is how you would test a drug that targets aging. And then what drug that's currently widely used would make the most sense to use in what might be the first example of a clinical trial like this. And at the time, metformin was a good choice, but probably we would choose something different now.
Oh, we should get into what we would choose now. I think this is really interesting just to summarize what I'm hearing for our listeners who may not be familiar with this whole FDA approval process. Like, we have really promising therapeutics that work in model systems like fruit flies. How do we translate that into medications that humans can use? Well, we do a clinical trial, but you have to have an outcome of that clinical trial, and you can't wait 4 decades to get your results. There's no NIH mechanism for that. So you have to have some sort of intermediary marker, and there may be disagreement in the field around exactly what that marker would be or measure, whether it's intrinsic capacity or something else. But we need some sort of measure that we can say, this is an effective medication in order for the FDA to say, okay, this is something we'd want to improve. We agree this is reasonable drug to test and an outcome to test. And boy, if it's generic, then no pharmaceutical company is going to fund that study.
So
unfortunately.
Let me ask you this. Are there any current interventions that you think have really good evidence already that they extend either lifespan or health span?
In humans?
In humans.
In humans.
Pharmacological, non-pharmacological, anything that you do that you think, hey.
Yes, but I'm going to sound boring if I say, good lifestyle, exercise, a sound nutrition, focused on your mental health and sleep, and have friendships and relationships.
That's great.
Because
I think it's important we say that. Yes, thank you.
I was asked actually last week.
But those are so hard. Can I just take a pill?
They are actually harder than you think. Yeah, you're right.
But somebody asked me. They said, "What is your absolute biohack for aging? What do you recommend as a biohack so that we can slow the aging process?" I said, "Exercise." And this reporter said, "But that's really boring. I want a pill or a." I said, "Okay, I'm sorry. There is no other biohack that I can think of."
Any particular type of exercise?
Well, I think we have to do a combination of cardio, mainly zone 2 and some zone 3, and also weight training. I mean, we used to think that it's all about cardiopulmonary health, but as we age, our muscle mass, decreases, and that's why we need to pay more attention to weight training and strength training.
And any particular diet?
I'm sorry?
Any particular diet that you would recommend?
I'm still a big fan of Mediterranean diet because I think that's the one with the best studies. And when I teach my students about nutrition and scientific wellness, I have to really summarize and make it simple. So I tell them, stay away from sugar and processed food. Let's just start there. I mean, that's a good place to start. And then we add vegetables and fruits and lean proteins and everything else.
John, anything else?
All the same things. But it's interesting that we assume that these lifestyle things would affect aging and would help you have more healthy longevity. That's actually never been shown in a randomized controlled trial. It's interesting, like that's the frontier of this field, actually. So there's more and more of these large multi-component randomized control trials, like the finger studies in Europe, and just recently in Latin America, the U.S. Pointer study. There was a SMART study out of Kaiser in collaboration with UCSF. More and
Forthcoming
more of these
podcast.
Oh,
Yep.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But
I
all of
agree,
which focus
John, but
on
we
one
do have-
domain and haven't shown yet, broad effects on aging across multiple domains, or this idea of like preventing chronic diseases.
Yeah.
We're going to do that. We're going to, hopefully for the first time, show that a multi-component lifestyle intervention in collaboration with YMCA can broadly change an overall metric of aging based on intrinsic capacity, which is part of, and just one part of, believe it or not, a large national consortium that's funded by ARPA-H, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Healthcare, to create the frameworks for approving drugs based on intrinsic capacity. So to do everything that you would need to do for a drug company or an academic group to be able to just go to the FDA and say, I'd like to run this clinical trial. Here's an outcome measure that the FDA already has qualified that's based on intrinsic capacity and represents aging, and I can just plug my drug into that framework. There's so much work that you have to do to get to that world, and we're actually starting to do it.
Great. Mahtab, you were going to say something?
I was going to say that is great. I can't wait for this study to start and see the results. One of the reasons that then I started my lab, I stayed away from humans, although I am studying a couple of clinical studies myself, was that humans, they live too long. So I thought that if I start my lifespan study today, I will be dead by the time that there are any result. But the good news is that we do have smaller studies. I mean, they all have their limitations. I talked about KDM age, and a few months ago, a study was published from some Australian researchers showing that nutritional changes as short as 4 weeks impacted this biological age clock, meaning that only after 4 weeks of adding more fruits and vegetables to somebody's diet, they could see that the functional biomarkers, which KDM measures, were improved. So yes, the study had limitations. It was small. They didn't do a good job controlling who is eating what. But to me, smaller studies like this, when it comes to aging and slowing the aging process, are still promising. So, but I can't wait for this,
So at multi-component, exercise, nutrition, sleep, loneliness, we're addressing all of that. Do you take anything that's, let's say, a supplement or anything else that you think, hey, that maybe the benefits are not yet fully formed out, but the risks are small, so I'm taking it. Do you take any supplements or any other things?
I do.
What do you take?
I come from this framework that you have to do some testing. You can't just go to the store and buy a bunch of dietary supplements. So I have done testing, and I know that I'm vitamin D deficient. And if I don't take this supplement, I am deficient. So I tried to correct my vitamin D deficiency with food, and it just didn't work. So right now I take D. I take 1,000 units of vitamin D every day. And sometimes I have to increase it, because one thing that we don't know is how much sun we need to produce vitamin D. We really don't know that. So sometimes I take 2,000 units a day. So vitamin D, for sure, I think if you're deficient, you have to take it. And you can check really magnesium levels, but based on intake data, we know that more than 50% of US adults are, magnesium deficient. So I also take magnesium. And then recently I became interested in creatine. I used to be a skeptic until a few years ago, but the studies are overwhelmingly positive with a high quality creatine. So I also take 5 grams of creatine monohydrate every morning.
Alex, you take creatine, right?
I do, yeah. I take creatine. I take it because, as many of our listeners know, I like to do triathlons, like Ironman triathlons. And I find that it helps me recover faster so that I can exercise sooner the next time.
Is there any evidence around longevity in creatine, or is it just regaining muscle strength after exercise?
There's no data on longevity, lifespan. So I think creatine is more of a health span intervention. that it definitely improves muscle recovery.
Yeah.
There are some, smaller studies on its impact on cognition.
Yeah.
But I would say muscle health is the first.
John, do you take anything?
I think like a geriatrician. So I tend to be very like, I want to see the evidence. And once we have a clinical trial that shows something works, and like I know it's not helping, because if you don't know for sure something is helping, it's hurting.
Okay, John, I have to ask you a question.
He's got a butt. That means there's something coming.
Trials, and I agree with you. I wish we had the most amazing clinical trial on vitamin D.
Let's talk about clinical trials, though.
But the ones we have, they don't show benefit. I agree with you. But the problem is also with the way we design those studies. Nobody measured baseline vitamin D levels in those studies. And then they finish the study and say, oh, no impact on fractures, no impact on this. So to me, it's really hard to design a very high quality, double-blind, randomized controlled study with dietary supplements, because nutrition is complex. And everybody is different. We all have a
good point.
different omic background, genetic background. It's really complicated. So I try to err on the safe side with vitamin D and the supplements that I take.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of my confessions is because I lived in San Francisco, I take vitamin D. And I am when I didn't, I was deficient. And I'll admit to.
You're also in the sunny side of San Francisco, I believe. So.
Sunny-ish. I'm kind of on the border of the fog line. But creatine is interesting. I admit to experimenting with creatine for the purpose of trying to recover better with my volleyball habit as I get older. And I'll let you know. But we should talk about clinical trials, because I think a lot of your listeners may think that this is a data-free area, and they'd probably be surprised to learn, and maybe you guys don't know this, that there is a national NIH-funded clinical trial network for geroscience. It's called the Translational Geroscience Network. It's been in existence for about 8 years or so. And it's a national network of centers, of major academic centers. And its goal is to facilitate, to provide kind of structure and commonality of data elements and laboratory tests for clinical trials that target aging.
Do we have any results yet from that?
Yeah. So last time they counted, there were more than 100 clinical trials that are either completed or underway that use drugs or compound supplements that target biology of aging for, broad geroscience applications. And some examples of those are using drugs that target senescent cells in studies of Alzheimer's disease. There's a couple of examples of using mesenchymal stem cells in frailty or Alzheimer's disease. The NIH has funded 29 randomized controlled trials, mostly drugs and some supplements and some lifestyle interventions to target aging biology.
Good.
For example,
go ahead.
Well, like metformin. So Sarah Espinoza at now at Cedars-Sinai is just finishing up a reasonable sized randomized controlled trial of metformin in frailty. Adam Konopka at University of Wisconsin is running what will be the biggest so far randomized controlled trial of rapamycin or TOR inhibitors in middle-aged and older adults.
Can we do like a lightning round based on this? I'm wondering if you guys are open to this. Let's actually dive into for our listeners, because we only got a couple minutes left. Maybe I can just mention some and we can put it into buckets like
snake oil.
Yeah. So very promising. Or snake oil.
Those are your buckets.
Those
very
are your
promising.
buckets.
Or snake
oil. Or you think, oh man, we got a lot of
promising without data, or because you can be promising to like, that's a cool approach.
And we know this is hard
towards, human studies that might pan out or might not. And then there's promising like,
I think maybe we have some with a little bit of data too. So, and we got to be quick. People love this one. Jennifer Anderson loved this one. Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide boosters, or was it NAD plus?
NAD?
NAD? I don't know how you're... NAD plus.
Mahtab, what do you say?
As of right now, there are no clinical studies.
I say neutral, that the marketing has outpaced the clinical studies.
Marketing is amazing.
Small ones, but...
Yeah, so no evidence. This is not... And I think there may also be some potential harms maybe with these drugs. So maybe meh.
Well, I like to add something because the other side of the story is that, yes, it's really hard to increase NAD plus levels in your system, even with IV infusions, because nobody knows how it gets into the cells. But then how about precursors? How about NR? How about NMN? And again, we have some way to go.
So I
as
should
of
not start
today-
my infusions of NAD. Yeah.
Oh,
No.
you
I
are
would wait
doing
for more data.
infusions?
No.
Okay. One, I mean, if we're thinking about intrinsic capacity hitting a lot of different things, GLP-1, should I just start some GLP-1s? Where are you with the 3 buckets for GLP-1s?
If you need it.
If I need it.
And there are many indications now, right? Like obesity, diabetes. We recorded a podcast about this yesterday. There's a new
cardiovascular
bridging
perspective.
indication for Medicare coverage. So they got cardiovascular, renal. There are a lot of potential indications.
This is
So
another
sleep apnea.
Promising. It's among the top 3 classes of existing widely prescribed drugs that might be gerotherapeutic.
Can I
Top
guess
3.
the next one?
Yeah.
Pharma companies are really interested in this.
Yeah.
But the big gaps, one sentence,
Uh-huh.
effects on people who are not overweight and don't have diabetes. There hasn't yet been a big study showing clear benefit in people who don't have one of those 2 conditions. And safety in older adults. We need more large studies to show that direct.
Which we will have a podcast on talking about the sarcopenia associated with GLP-1.
Yeah, risk to bone health as well.
Wait for that. Alex is going to mention number 2.
SGLT2 inhibitors?
That's a maybe.
That's a maybe. Okay.
Because we do have good clinical studies. And if you listen to the scientists who go for the evidence, I would say that this is something that looks promising. This is a group of drugs that look promising.
John?
If I were to run a study like TAME today, I'd probably pick an SGLT2 inhibitor because they're the only drugs so far that have multiple indications for multiple major age-related diseases, which don't require you to have the original indication. So chronic kidney disease, whether or not you have diabetes, heart failure, whether or not you have diabetes, plus other stuff.
Yeah.
And the only drugs so far that clearly are a benefit in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, which is a multi-system geriatric syndrome. It's not a heart problem. And the fact that this class works is the only thing so far clearly shown to work in that, to me, is highly promising. That the only caveat is that in large studies, they have clearly a big effect on cardiovascular mortality, not as clear of an effect on non-cardiovascular mortality. So maybe their effect is mostly about cardio, but still promising.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number 3, Alex.
Well, I'd probably say it's the metformin class, whatever that is.
What was number 3, John? You said there were top 3.
Yeah.
Metformin. Okay, yeah.
Where does that fall for you? Promising?
Still promising, but falling a bit down the list because it just doesn't have drug companies putting out more and more big studies the way that they are for SGLT2s and GLP-1s. And
because it's generic. Yeah.
So not its own fault.
Right.
And there's some data that may blunt
agree.
exercise effects. And exercise is really, really important.
Yes, Mahtab pointed out, it's generic. So what drug company is going to pay for this?
Okay, I got to ask another one. It was a hot topic, I think, not too long ago, maybe 5-10 years ago. Resveratrol. What was the name of it again?
Resveratrol.
Where is that now?
I would say it's pretty much gone.
Dead in the water. John?
Yeah.
Was that the red wine one?
That's the red wine one.
Oh, that's the red wine one.
Rapamycin. Now we're going to other real drugs. Like, man, we got some potential risks with these. Rapamycin?
Rapamycin is one compound that has had really promising lifespan extension in different model systems. Even, in different model systems. I'm just going to leave that. But the human study, again, is facing funding issues. So it hasn't been completed. But the other issue with rapamycin is like the side effect profile. So you take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Rapamycin, high ceiling, low floor. We don't really, super promising in model organisms. We don't really know in people, but there are several medium-sized clinical trials. Keep an eye out for the results. Mentioned the ones from Wisconsin, which is in people with metabolic disease. really interesting one at Columbia, which is pre and perimenopausal women to look at rapamycin's effect on ovarian aging, which would be really cool. And another study in Texas in Alzheimer's disease. So we'll know a lot more in a couple of years, but I'm not sure about rapamycin.
And the dog studies on rapamycin, the results will be interesting.
What about testosterone or estrogen? Are they in the play here? Or are they?
If you need it and you don't have any contraindications. So having a hormonal balance is always a good thing.
Testosterone is definitely
but
not
just don't do it on your own. Talk to your physician because you want to make sure that you need it and you're being monitored.
John, you were going to say?
Testosterone is definitely not an anti-aging drug. It may help in the right context. It might help with rehab, with building muscle, but it is not an anti-aging.
I see a lot of those red light masks and like people are charging like full body red light. Is that a thing? Any thoughts on that? I think maybe more just about skin aging, but...
Yeah, there are some promising results with really small studies, mainly funded by companies that made those devices that are promising. But I think that's still, we have some way to go before this is a miracle.
And you look pretty lame with that mask on. John, thoughts?
I have no idea.
I'd never heard of that before this moment.
Okay, I got another one. There's a company coming out trying to get FDA approval to extend the life and health span of large dogs using IGF inhibitors, I believe. John, thoughts on that?
This is so cool. This is probably going to be the first drug with an FDA approval around aging. And it's going to be for our dogs, because of course it's going to be for our dogs.
We love our dogs.
There's such a close link between IGF signaling and aging that goes all the way back to worms and flies. Less IGF signaling, longer lifespan. This is why big dogs don't live as long as little dogs. It's because the amount of IGF that makes them big dogs, but affects their lifespan. So like biologically makes a ton of sense and will help our dogs live longer. I can't wait for that to come out. I have little dogs though. So
I got to say, as a big dog lover, I'm actually excited about this because I don't really like little dogs. So sorry, John.
Mahtab, any thoughts on that before we end?
No, I'm actually learning about this, but anything that inhibits IGF, I think is a good thing. In my flies, we have done studies looking at transgenic flies with different doses of IGF, and we see lifespan extension. So, yeah.
Any botanicals that we didn't mention that you think are?
Well, for the main botanical extract that I've been working with in my lab for the past 20 years is rhodiola rosea, which is not a very well-known botanical, but the first time we published a paper on its impact on lifespan, everybody was like, what is this? What does it do? And then other labs, the beauty of rhodiola is that other labs replicated our work in worms, in silkworms, and in other model species. So this botanical extract, if you can get a hold of like a good quality one, so far it has shown a lot of promise in my lab. And there are clinical studies on its use because it's a botanical extract used in traditional medical practices. I'm talking fast because you kept saying that.
Lightning. No, thank you. So I'm guessing this is similar to yours. If I was a fruit fly, you'd recommend it for me.
I definitely recommend it to you if you were a fruit fly. But also, I have to say that in Europe, European Medicine Agency recognizes rhodiola rosea. They have an indication for it for fatigue.
Oh.
And the clinical trial that I'm designing right now is going to be an NIH grant, is to test its impact on fatigue.
Okay.
So there are clinical studies, but not on lifespan.
John, you get the last one. Anything else that we didn't mention?
Wild card, some more about the drugs. Zoledronic acid is actually up on the list because it has a surprising reduction in mortality that's not obviously explained by differences in fracture rates. So some interest in zoledronic acid too.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
Huh.
Oh, that was fascinating. I think we can keep on this going for a while.
Right. We learned so much today. And that's why we love doing this podcast. Thank you.
A little bit more of Avicii.
Yeah. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I didn't know I was lost.
Mahtab John, thank you for joining us on this podcast.
Thank
Gonna,
you for having me.
gonna have to have you come back in a couple years because the
Yeah,
field is changing so fast.
landscape's
So thank
shifting.
you.
Thank
Good.
you.
Yeah, some of the statements we made today, it may not even be accurate in like 6
Right?
months.
We'll see.
The field is moving in the speed of light.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to the listeners for all your support. We'd also like to do a big shout out to those who've donated more than $250 in the last year, including
Carrie Levy, Marnie Feltzer, Ron Sabar, Stephanie Gabatuller, Patrick Lally, Richard Lewis, Margaret Leung, Cindy Harris in honor of Emily Guillot, April Sear, Anna Naik, Sudha Chandrasekhar, Michelle Reisner, Asher Edwards, Susan Nelson, Rebecca Goldstein, Rochelle Bernacki, Carol Dietrich, Mark Andrews Wren, Elizabeth Cobbs, Amy Rock, Meg Walhagen, Xinyi Wang, Sharon Bragman, James Tulsky and Yana Saraf, Kelly Strait, Michael Bordowski, Jessica McFarland, Gretchen Schwarzy and Joshua Mesrich, Rob Razak, Diane Meyer and Sean Morrison, Elizabeth Chung, the John A. Hartford Foundation, Lloyd Woolstat, Harry Hahn, Bob Arnold, Ginger Robbins, Matt Schuster, Maureen Kearney, and Kenny Lamb.
thank you.